The grocery bags cut into my fingers as I froze outside the meditation room door. Selena's voice drifted through the crack, low and deliberate, each word landing like a stone in my chest. She needs space, Richard. Sending her to a college out of state would be good for everyone. My father's response was barely audible, but Selena continued with the confidence of someone who'd already won. She's holding us back, and honestly, she's too attached to this house. Distance will help her grow. The cold from outside was still clinging to my jacket, but I suddenly felt colder from the inside out. My throat tightened. The bag slipped slightly in my grip, apples shifting against canned goods, but I couldn't move. She wasn't just pushing chores onto me anymore. She wanted me gone entirely, erased from the only place that still held pieces of my mother, my grandparents, everything that mattered. My name is Aurora, I'm 22, and I work doubles at a cafe while taking online classes. This is the story of how I discovered that the home I thought I'd lost was actually mine all along. I'd been invisible in this house for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to take up space. 10 years since my mom died. 10 years since Selena moved in with her glossy suitcases and children who treated our home like a hotel. 10 years of shrinking myself smaller and smaller until I was practically a ghost, moving through rooms my grandparents had once filled with warmth. Harold and Elise had stepped in after Mom passed, selling their own place to move here with Dad and me. I was 12 and drowning in grief so complete that some days I forgot to breathe. Elise would sit with me at the old dining table, teaching me to chop vegetables slowly, her hands guiding mine. "Take your time, sweetheart. There's no rush with the important things." Harold tended Mom's roses in the backyard, humming old songs that made the grief feel less like drowning and more like floating. Dad met Selena at a work conference about 18 months after Mom's death, and she moved in within the year. By the time I turned 14, she was reorganizing our kitchen, replacing Mom's ceramic bowls with what she called modern pieces. Harold's jaw would tighten when he noticed, but he never said anything. Neither did I. Blake and Luna moved in like they'd always belonged here. Blake, who was 16 at the time, claimed the downstairs den for his gaming setup. Luna, 14 like me, spread her entire wardrobe across 2 closets while complaining about the lighting. The chores started small, vacuuming, setting the table, then expanded until I was doing everything. When I asked why Blake and Luna never helped, Selena would tilt her head with that practiced smile. "They have different needs, honey. You're more mature." My father never pushed back. He seemed relieved to have someone managing the household he'd emotionally abandoned years ago. By 16, I'd memorized everyone's routines like a script I hadn't auditioned for. Blake slept until noon, leaving piles of clothes that reeked of stale chips and body spray. Luna rehearsed her fake laugh for videos she never posted, treating every room like a potential backdrop. Selena floated through the house, running her fingers along surfaces, testing for dust, pausing at Mom's framed photo in the hallway, but never acknowledging it. I convinced myself that staying quiet was strength, that patience would eventually be recognized, but resentment stacks, layer by layer, until even the smallest weight makes everything shift. And standing there that night with grocery bags cutting into my hands, overhearing Selena plan my exile, I felt the entire structure collapse. I set the bags down carefully in the kitchen, my hands shaking slightly. Blake's dishes from 3 days ago sat crusted in the sink. Luna's makeup brushes were scattered across the counter like she'd been interrupted mid-transformation. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, the same light Elise used to cook under, humming while she stirred soup that filled the whole house with the smell of home. I needed to think, to remember. I walked to the back of the house where the old storage room still smelled faintly of Elise's lavender sachets. I pulled open the old cedar chest, dust motes swirling in the thin winter sunlight. Inside were Harold's gardening gloves, a faded recipe book, brittle photos curled at the edges. And then I found the envelope. My name in Elise's handwriting, sharp, steady, intentional. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were documents confirming something I'd never imagined. Harold and Elise hadn't just moved in with us. They'd bought this house outright and transferred ownership to me years before they passed. My grandparents had died 4 years ago when I was 18 and had made these arrangements quietly in the months before. Intentionally. As if they'd known I would someday need this protection. I sat on the wooden floor for a long time, the envelope in my lap, feeling their presence like hands on my shoulders. Not urging revenge, just reminding me I'd never been as alone as Selena wanted me to believe. The next afternoon, I drove across town to Marilyn's craftsman-style home in a quieter neighborhood of Denver. She was Mom's closest friend, and her living room still smelled like cinnamon and old books. She listened without interrupting as I told her everything. The rent demand I knew was coming, Selena's plan to send me away, the documents my grandparents had left. When I finished, Marilyn nodded slowly. "Aurora, your grandparents trusted you more than anyone. They saw who Selena was long before you did. This isn't just a house, it's your boundary." We spent the next hour sorting through additional papers Elise had given Marilyn for safekeeping. Old bills, notes from Harold about the property, a few recorded voicemails that caught Selena speaking harshly to Elise years ago. Nothing dramatic, but enough to confirm a pattern. By the time I left, the sun had dipped behind Denver's rooftops, casting everything in muted blue. I drove home with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. Determination. Purpose. Selena wanted to push me out. Instead, she'd pushed me into remembering who this house truly belonged to. I spent the next 2 days gathering evidence and preparing for what I knew was coming. On the evening I'd overheard Selena, I'd quietly started a voice recording app on my phone before setting down the groceries. Something about her tone through that door had warned me to document everything. I didn't plan to confront her that week, but Selena cornered me the 3rd day after I'd found the documents, right after a closing shift. I still smelled like espresso when I found her sitting at the dining table with a folder placed neatly in front of her. Blake sprawled on the couch, headset around his neck. Luna sat cross-legged on the floor, scrolling through her phone like the house was just another backdrop. Selena smiled without warmth. "Perfect timing, Aurora. We need to discuss your financial contribution." I hung up my coat slowly, letting the silence stretch. "Contribution?" "Yes." She slid a sheet of paper toward me. $800 a month, plus your share of utilities. It's only fair." She glanced at Blake and Luna. "Everyone has responsibilities." I looked at them. Blake picking crumbs off his shirt. Luna adjusting her ring light. "Everyone?" Selena blinked. "Don't be difficult, they're focusing on their futures. You're working now." A small, humorless laugh escaped me. "Their futures." Blake scoffed. "Don't start, Aurora." Luna flipped her hair. "Some people just don't get it." Selena's expression hardened. "This is happening. Your father agrees. It's time you learned independence." Independence. In the house my grandparents had sacrificed for. The house Elise had cried in after losing her daughter. The house Harold had repaired board by board with his own hands. I straightened, sliding the paper back to her. "If you want a discussion, call everyone downstairs. We're doing this as a family." Selena loved the illusion of formality. She agreed instantly. 5 minutes later, Dad rushed into the dining room, tie askew, face tired. "What's going on?" Selena answered for everyone. "Your daughter is refusing to contribute to our household." I didn't look at her. I looked at him. "Dad, do you really think I should pay $800 to live here?" He hesitated. Just a beat, but enough to confirm everything I feared. "Selena and I talked about it. It seems reasonable." "Reasonable?" I repeated softly. "For me to pay rent while Blake and Luna don't?" Dad swallowed. "They're still finding their path." I nodded slowly, letting every detail etch itself into memory. Then I placed Elise's envelope on the table. "Okay," I said. Then let's talk about the house. Selena's face twitched, a tiny glitch beneath the makeup. What does that mean? I opened the envelope and set the documents down, not pushing them toward anyone, just letting them exist, letting the truth sit between us. This house, I said quietly, legally belongs to me. Silence fell like a shockwave. Blake stopped mid-breath. Luna lowered her phone. Dad's eyes widened with recognition, guilt, resignation. Selena laughed first, too loudly. What is this? Some fantasy? You can ask Dad, I said evenly. He's known since Harold and Elise passed 4 years ago. Dad closed his eyes. Selena, it's true. They put the house in Aurora's name before they died. The room froze, a stillness so complete it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. Selena stood abruptly, chair scraping harshly against the floor. Why wasn't I told? Why wouldn't you share something like this with me? Dad shrank under her stare. It didn't seem necessary. Not necessary. She nearly shouted. I've managed this home for years. I deserve to know. I cut in. Deserve. You've treated me like unpaid labor in the home my grandparents gave me. Selena pointed a shaking finger at me. You ungrateful. No, I said, my voice sharp as glass. We're done rewriting reality. I reached into my bag and placed a second folder on the table. This is a summary of every payment, every bill, every expense I've covered for the house for years. Dad's face fell as he skimmed the pages. Aurora, why didn't you tell me? You never asked. Selena grabbed the papers, scanning them with frantic disbelief. You think this proves anything? You think you can push me around because you found old paperwork? I didn't react. Instead, I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Her voice filled the room, the recording from her meditation room. She needs space, Richard. Sending her to a college out of state would be good for everyone. She's holding us back. She's too attached to this house. Dad went pale. Blake muttered, Damn, under his breath. Luna's face drained of color. Selena lunged for the phone. You recorded me. It's legal, I said calmly, and necessary. She looked between all of us, realizing her performance was collapsing. This is my home, she whispered fiercely. I've been here 12 years. You don't get to kick me out. I opened the final folder and slid it toward her. You're right. I don't get to. The law does. She stared down at the eviction notice. Official, completed, stamped. Her mouth fell open as though the floor had shifted beneath her feet. You can't do this, she said, voice trembling. Richard, say something. Dad looked at her, not cruelly, but with an exhaustion so deep it softened his entire posture. Selena, it's her house. Blake jumped to his feet. Where are we supposed to go? That, I said, is no longer my responsibility. Luna's eyes filled with tears, but even then she lifted her phone slightly, instinctively preparing to film her own meltdown. Selena shook her head, muttering, This is absurd. This is revenge. No, I said. This is a boundary you forced me to draw. The room swirled with shock, denial, scrambling accusations. Selena paced. Blake cursed. Luna cried softly. Dad sank into a chair like a man finally seeing the wreckage around him. I simply gathered the papers, placed them back into Elise's envelope, and took a step toward the hallway. You have 2 weeks, I said. Then I take back my home. Selena stopped moving. You think you're strong enough to do this? I met her eyes, steady, unshaken. I didn't think so before. But you helped me understand what strength really looks like. And as I walked upstairs to my room, leaving all three of them in stunned silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not guilt, but the unmistakable weight of my grandparents' faith settling firmly onto my shoulders. The eviction wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. 2 weeks later, on a cold Saturday morning, the house finally emptied. The morning Selena finally left, the house felt strangely quiet. No synthetic perfume clouding the hallway, no raised voices drifting from the den, no demands disguised as suggestions. Blake hauled out his gaming equipment with loud complaints, moving in temporarily with a friend from his online gaming group. Luna cried the entire time, heading to stay with Selena's sister across town. None of it shook me. I watched from the doorway, steady, grounded, knowing this wasn't cruelty, it was correction. Dad moved out the same day, renting a small apartment downtown near his office. Before he left, we stood together in the empty living room. "I should have protected you," he said quietly. "I should have seen what was happening." I nodded, but couldn't find the words to absolve him. 3 months later, he filed for divorce from Selena, finally acknowledging that the marriage had been built on his avoidance rather than genuine connection. We meet for coffee now, once a month. Slow, careful conversations where we're learning to be honest with each other. The relationship isn't healed, but it's no longer hollow. Selena moved into a rental property she found through a realtor, taking only what had originally been hers. I never saw her again after that Saturday, though I heard through Marilyn that she'd started attending therapy. Whether that's true or simply what she wanted people to believe, I don't know. What I do know is that her chapter in this house closed the day she drove away. Once the house was empty, I opened all the windows and let Denver's cold winter air wash through every room. Marilyn moved into one of the spare bedrooms a week later, bringing homemade soup and stories about Mom I'd never heard before. Together, we restored the small things Elise had once loved: the ceramic bowls, the way the dining table was set, the roses in the backyard. For the first time in years, I woke up without bracing myself. The house wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a home. Looking back, reclaiming this house wasn't about walls or paperwork. It was about finally choosing myself after years of shrinking to make room for people who never intended to offer anything back. My grandparents didn't leave me a home. They left me a reminder that love protects even long after it's gone. If you've ever had to fight for your place in your own family, you're not alone. Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because sometimes justice is quiet, but it changes everything.